Greetings from the home of Mrs. Mary Malin. This is Ray Mofield speaking for the Oral History Project, in which we're doing recordings for the Marshall County Library, the Pogue Library at Murray State University, and the State Archives in Frankfort. It's a delight to be on U.S. Highway 641 North and to see a person that I don't see too terribly often, but I do remember when you worked at the insurance agent.
I worked at Peel and Holland from November 1929, starting with D.R. Peel, and I retired in October 1972 from Peel and Holland. And a good many things transpired during that time. I can remember when I first started working for D.R. Peel, when I answered the telephone, I said, "Hello, insurance office." That was the only one in the county.
So you didn't have to explain which one it was.
Explain one.
How old are you, Mrs. Malin?
Well, I was born in 1910, so that made me 73 years old, not many days ago.
And were you born in Marshall County?
I was born in Marshall County in the vicinity of Calvert City. We had lived in and around Calvert for a good many years. I think my father, George East, married my mother, Alma White, in the vicinity of somewhere between Calvert City and Altony.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the first things I remember at all in my life was in 1913. My sister hadn't got here yet. We had the floods that a few people remember.
Oh, that was one of the real big floods, 1913, 1927, and then, of course, the granddaddy of all of them, 37.
Right.
I remember 37. But tell us about 1913. Did it affect Marshall County some?
Yes. Down the north end of the county, all I can remember about it was how excited the people were. Of course, I was too young to actually remember what happened, but people were so excited.
Now, was that water coming up Clark's River?
Tennessee.
Oh, the Tennessee River, yes.
Tennessee River down there below Haddock's Ferry. That's where a bunch of the neighborhood went down there one afternoon to see what they could see and see if
it was rising rapidly then.
Evidently, it was.
Well, you're the first person that I've ever heard mention anything about the flood in Marshall
Maybe nobody wants to admit they're that old.
Oh, I've had some that were...
Harry Hurley could tell you something about it, because he lived in that area on the DeHaven farm.
You know, people have gone crazy about genealogy. Do you know any of your ancestors back further than your parents?
Not too much about my father's. I have some distant cousins around in the county of the east, and they haven't taken much trouble to contact me, and I haven't them. I've been lax on the genealogical aspect on both sides of the family.
A fellow named Boyce East, I believe, works at the school out here. Teacher.
Yes, he's one of the cousins. His father, Everett, and Lou Jetty are the ones I generally keep up with. And the rest of them, I know who they are and know their names, but that's all I know on that side.
What about the Wyatts?
The Wyatts now, they were, Nina McWater's a bunch of Wyatts, you know.
Yes.
And my grandmother was a Stice, and she married George Harris White. They lived here in Benton a good while, and everybody knew her by Aunt Betty. Aunt Betty was an old-time school teacher and quite a student, and she's the one that interested me more than anything else in reading and so on. And as I said, I had found some notes that my great Aunt Martha, she was an old maid, Aunt Martha Stice had made about some of the Stices, where her great grandfather, and that was my great aunt's, was killed in the Battle of New Orleans
In
in the
the,
Revolutionary War.
Oh, the Battle of New Orleans.
Uh-huh.
General, a lot of Kentuckians went down to fight in what
And
was
he
really
was a
called the
myrtle.
War of 1812.
Yeah, he was a myrtle.
That was January the 8th, 1815.
She didn't put the date on there. She did have the date on these notes that she had made when she had found that information and jotted them down.
I
in
just happen
pencil
to
on
remember the
something.
day of the battle.
Yeah. Well, I'm not that much of a historian. But now I've been helping some of the whites with the information I had here as far as I could go back. My grandmother had all the Stice history from way back when they came here from Virginia. But that got lost somewhere. I think my uncle had it.
Well, just tell us about some of those things you have there.
We moved from the Calvert City area when I was a little girl and lived on the George Stice place near Tatumsville. My grandmother lived close to there too. And we used to go up to John Hodges' store there in Tatumsville, a little shotgun type store, and it was covered up in buckets and ropes and tools and screws and groceries.
Didn't that hold a lot of interest to a little girl?
Oh,
Or
of
boy?
course. And I was about 4 years old, and my father, George East, took me up to John Hodges from, we lived a mile or so away, I guess, to get some things. And this big black man walked in the door. I'd never seen anybody that color, or apparently that big in my life.
So you were frightened?
And he noticed me and tapped my dad on the shoulder and said, "Mr. East, you better pick up your little girl." And he eased out the back door. So I was going to shock.
Did you later learn them much better and come to like them?
Yes. I learned who he was. He was George Birtle. And he had been in the Birtle family. Now this great-grandfather, John Birtle, or whoever it was that was killed, they had a lot of land. And way back when, they'd apparently had slaves somewhere in the family. But he was George Birtle. And he married Angeline. I don't know who she was, but she was a beautiful woman.
And you got to know them a lot better and became good friends with them.
And they'd take me to their house and spoil me and pet me and bake cakes and pies for me. But
beauty is
the family,
as beauty does, isn't it?
They had to make a lot of explanation and tell me that everybody wasn't white. And I got curious about the insides of their hands. And they had to tell me that they're...
That's just natural, isn't it? Yeah.
So that eased my scare, you know. Well, that was one interesting thing, and I don't know, other people may have some things like that to tell. The first time I actually went to school was out at Old Bailey School.
Old Bailey. Now, I don't believe I remember hearing that.
Well,
was that
it was
near
at
Calvert?
No, that was around Tatumsville. That was after we left Calvert for a spell. And some of the teachers I had, well, the very first teacher I had was a Mr. Elliott. He was an old fellow. And he did some of the strangest things. I remember one thing he did to a little girl to embarrass the child to death. But anyway, I won't go into that. But he was the first real sure enough teacher I had at Bailey. Then we moved back to Calvert City. And I was still a little girl, but I was a little bigger girl. And some of the teachers I had in the grade school there were Miss Genoa Philbeck.
Oh, I remember her.
She was teaching there. She was Genoa Cobb, and she married Fred, and he was going off to World War II.
World War I, maybe.
I mean, World War I.
Yes.
And I remember all the big girls and boys teasing them, you know. Of course, when I went to school in the grades then, they were as old as Fred and Genoa were, I guess.
Just about.
But I was in one of the lower grades, and she's one of my teachers. And Lucy Fast, I'm sure you've heard of her.
Yes, sir.
She is one of the old timers. And Karen Solomon Holland was one of my teachers at Calvert City.
Well, you have a great memory then.
Don't I, though?
You really
I have a lot to remember. A lot of good things to remember.
Good.
And, of course, later on, Mr. Homer Ford was principal there, and Miss Larry, his wife, you know, taught after the high school
Yes.
started over there.
He told me
And,
once that he coached, I believe, the first
He
formal
did,
basketball team they
and
had.
some of the Hollands were in that area were on that team, you know. There was, let's see, Lucille Holland Stice came a little later on, but Berlin and Henrietta, Miss Bessie's girls, played on one of the girls' basketball teams down there.
Oh, yes.
And I can't remember what their brother's name. He played on one of the boys' teams. Well,
Did you like what most in school? Arithmetic, maybe?
actually English and literature. But I came to like arithmetic.
You figured a lot of policies over the years.
Oh, my father taught me to read before I ever went to school.
Yes.
In fact, I'd had the primer and the first reader and what they called it then before I ever went to school. And but somehow or other he didn't take much time with figures. And it was in after I went to Bailey School, after Daddy died, we lived at my grandmother's, George Harris White and Aunt Betty's, down there at Tatumsville. We lived there then, while Mother went out to work and make a living. And so some of the teachers I had out at Bailey School after that were some that you may remember. Bernice Hall
Yes.
and Early Green.
I don't remember him.
He's one of Miss Leela. You know Miss Leela, don't you?
Yes.
That taught in the county. He was a brother, and he taught there 1 year. And Wayne Stice. And Wayne is the one that got me to learn that you had to think to get numbers and arithmetic.
Mm-hmm.
And once I got the hang of it, I really loved it. After I got to high school, it was one of my favorite subjects.
You say you liked literature. Did they make you memorize any poems back then?
Yes. I wasn't all that good at memorizing. I'd have to write it down 2 or 3 times. I couldn't read it over and over to memorize like I did. Of course, I was in Eastern Star later, and we had to memorize all this business, and that was always a job for me to actually do memory work. I could figure something out and read it and get up and make a speech about it and tell you about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I wasn't all that good on memory work. But I had thanatopsis, among other things.
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, I liked the things like the daffodils and things like that. Had a little more rhythm to them. But
That's always been one of my favorite poems.
What, daffodils?
Uh-huh.
Well, I loved it. Wandered
Wordsworth.
lonely as a crowd among...
The floats on high o'er vale and hills, and all at once I saw a crowd, a host of golden daffodils, beside the lake, beneath the trees, fluttering and dancing in the breeze. And then those last lines, weren't they great? I gazed and gazed, but little thought.
What wealth the show to me had brought, for oft as on my couch I lie,
In
vacant
vacant
or in pensive mood, they dash upon that inward eye, which is the bliss of solitude. And
then my heart with pleasure fills,
and dances with the daffodils.
Oh, that's marvelous. That's
Oh,
marvelous.
yes. Well, now those were some of the teachers we had at Bailey School. And I learned arithmetic there. And in high school, I really went to town on all the math I had. even geometry.
What
breezed
kind of
through that.
games did you play? You remember any of them?
Oh, yes, we'd play cat ball, I guess they called it. The girls and boys, there wasn't enough of us out at Bailey. We all had to play. And so we'd get out there and play ball. And my sister was the ball player and the athlete, and she liked to get out and play.
Mm-hmm.
And if I went anywhere to play and there was any books or papers on hand, I let them all go by and sit down with the book. That's one reason I don't do any housework now. And but we did that, and Calvert City is where we really played. The lot where Dr. Little's office was there, you know, there was fields in back of there, and the Titchener place, which is where the Draffins have the place all fixed up, you know.
Yes.
William Roy.
Uh-huh.
And but there was fields all in back of there, and we could play all these hiding games, hide and seek, and we'd play wolf over the river and kick the can, and oh, I don't know, all those
Wonderful
crazy
old
wild
games.
And all the time, if they didn't have enough to make partners or something, and some of them, they'd keep hollering at me, and I'd be up there on the porch reading the papers. But I played with them anyway.
Tell us what the business was like around Calvert then.
Well, now
did the
the
Draffins have a
Draffins
store?
had their little store at that time when we were living there, and it was a one room thing. It may have had a storeroom in the back for things, you know, but they started out in a little way, and we went to that little store there.
Yes.
And of course later I'd moved away from Calvert when they started building their better stores and places like that. I think they probably had 2 places before they got established in the big one. And then Mr. Lee Cox, you know, had that store, and we lived in a little house that Mr. Lee rented. And he and Miss Ellie ran this store, and Etheridge Harrell worked for them. And they worked on the farm, and I can remember they'd take me and my sister, we were little, and on this old automobile they had lights up on the sides and tin light fenders, you know, and everything was way up high off the ground.
Was that a big thrill to you then?
Yes, and we'd go down to the farm, you know. They had a big farm, and we'd go down there with Etheridge and Miss Ellie while Mr. Cox kept the store. But they had a Sunday car, you know.
Oh,
This was the car. It had been a Sunday car, but they used it for their errands and to go
drive
to the farm.
to the farm.
Uh-huh.
Because already there were 2-car families.
They were a 2-car family.
Yeah.
And we lived right at the DeHavens, too, at that time. Well, they had a touring car, and I don't know whether it was a Buick or a Dodge, but it had 12 isinglass windows in the back, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And the DeHavens would take us for a ride in their car. And Zimrud was going to school somewhere. You know Zimrud, Newer.
Yes.
She was going to school at Western State University, I believe, and was actually studying to be a missionary doctor. And I can remember her bringing home Kodak pictures just for the carloads. And we
Those
loved
were
to
not
go.
real common then, were they?
No, But she just had loads of them, of things that had taken place up at school. And we'd go up there and she'd show us her pictures, you know, and we thought that was the height of heaven. Of course, we were poor, and my father his health was bad, and for people to notice little girls like us and take interest in us, you know, I still think was something. His
Yeah.
finest people back there that ever was in the world.
Uh-huh.
And now let's see. I'm just wandering here. Dr. Little, he was our mainstay, he and Agnes, his wife. Now, Agnes was a sister to Lucy Fast, this teacher, and one of her sisters was Hattie Fast that married Harry Miller, who was sheriff of Marshall County at one time. And so they were, without them and a lot of other good people, I don't know whether I'd have been here now or not.
Yes.
And
Doctors made house calls then.
oh, you're not kidding. And undertakers went into the home and did their work too.
Oh, they did. You,
we moved
the
in.
neighbors dug the graves and.
You know, we moved in at Philbeck's when they built the building up there on the corner. We had that apartment up there.
Yes, sir.
And they were sort of taking the initiative in the county of trying to teach people to come in and have their embalming and their dressing and everything done. But Fred was still going, and Duncan would go with him to some of these places to take care of the people at home that didn't
Yes.
want to bring them in. It was several years before they did that. So doctors made calls and undertakers did too.
Yeah.
Funeral directors, they don't want to be called undertakers. And so we went through all that. And I heard somebody saying something about the itch and head lice. Well, we got head lice out at Bailey one time. My sister was blonde, and she got them first, and Grandma couldn't see them. She kept itching on her head. She couldn't see hers till I slept with her, and I got them too, and my hair was black. So Grandma, it
The lice
embarrassed
then showed up. They were a lighter
those
color.
little nits.
Mhm.
Yeah, the little eggs, you know, showed up white. So Bernice Hall was the teacher there at Bailey, and see, we were living at Grandma's then. Daddy had died. So she sent this note up there that her children had got Jerusalem travelers, parenthesis, head lice, parenthesis closed. And whoever had them, she said, I'm cleaning the children up. I expect everybody else to do the same. So she used cola and whatnot.
Kerosene would kill them then. Yeah.
I guess it did. She used plenty of it if it didn't kill the child first.
Yeah.
Well, that was interesting. Or I thought it was. Anything's interesting to kids. So I finished grade school at Bailey, and then it was time for me to go to high school. And the first year I went to Calvert City, a half a year. And Mother was working in Paducah, so I went down to Paducah with her while Idell stayed at Grandma's, and went to Tillman the last half of the first year. Then we moved to Benton in 1924, and I was a sophomore in high school and went to school 3 years and graduated here. And while I was going to school, I wrote news for the Paducah Sun, or whatever it was at that time. Do you remember what it would have been in 1927?
They had up till, I believe, 29, they had the Evening News and they had the Paducah Sun.
Paducah Sun, that's...
They later merged. I think they merged in 29.
Yeah, I
George
guess it
Goodman
was.
had one of the papers and the Paxtons had the other.
It was the Sun that I wrote Benton News for. And I was on the debating team in 1927.
A debater and a journalist? Why, you've been everything.
Well, I never did exactly I worked for an attorney, but that's what I thought I wanted to do, either a journalist or a lawyer.
Or a lawyer.
And I didn't wind up either one. But we won the state championship at Lexington in 1927. And that was...
There was a story in one of the papers a year or so ago about that.
I guess I had it put it... somebody...
Was Mr. Morgan one of the... Was he the coach?
Hatler's father was the coach, and Paul, one of Hatler's brothers, was on the team. Albert Carnes, you know Albert.
I remember him. He did make a lawyer.
Yeah, and Renus Newton was on it, and Howard Williams was on it until their finances run out, and it was they could just send so many on the debate team, and somebody had to stay home. And Howard said, "Let Mary go. I want to play baseball anyway, and it's time to start the season." And I know he just did that for me.
Just to make you feel better. Wasn't that generous, though?
It was. It was real sweet. And I then had my business course at St. Mary's in Paducah, and I worked for Miller Hughes during the Hoover campaign in 1928, and I came up here one day and introduced Governor Sampson while they were having their campaign.
Clem D. Sampson.
Clem D. Sampson.
I remember that.
And I tried at the shoe factory a while I was in Paducah, and then I went to Detroit. I thought I could make a fortune up there, and I had my application in to Bell Telephone, or whatever they called it up there, and they wanted me real bad, but I couldn't pass the physical. I kept running a temperature and having this little throat business, you know. So I never did get my job with Bell Telephone. I finally came back home and eventually started to work for Dwight Peel.
Mm-hmm.
And there I stayed and made my fortune and met Duncan and we married. And he came over here. I served on the library board at one time when Bob Ross was on the library board.
Well, good.
And I felt like I might have done a little something there.
Of course,
And
you served the whole county.
Of course, I've always belonged to the Methodist Church and been active in different things.
You remember
Sunday school
any of the
classes and
early
choir.
day preachers? We might get in some of their names.
At the Methodist Church?
Mhm.
Well, I've got a list in this history here. You want to wait while I've got that list where we had our 100th anniversary, you know? That'd be a good thing to get in there, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
Of course, when I came here, Brother Tom Bagby was the pastor. Brother K.G. Dunn, I.M. King, J.W. Fowler, who is Beulah Roberts' father, and Ray Pafford, Roy D. Williams, Bob O. Clark, Harry Williams, W.D. Grissom, V.H. Burnett, Marcus Gurley, Cecil Page, Clarence Hare, Charles Lynn, Joe Piercy, John Jones, and John Archer. And of course now we have Charles Yancey, who is our pastor now.
Yes.
And of course we've had...
Well, I thought that might be interesting to a number of people.
A lot of them will remember them, the Methodists over the county. When we lived at Calvert City and I was a little girl, we just had preaching once a month at each church.
Oh, I can remember that.
And my father belonged to the Church of Christ. My mother was a Methodist. And we lived across the street from the Baptist church. And wherever they preached is where we got our religion.
They
we'd just make
probably
the
had
round.
preaching different
Sundays, and we went wherever they had preaching. So I've been exposed to all kinds of good teaching, whether I've lived up to it or not.
Miss Malin, we have about 2 more minutes. If you have anything special you want to get in.
Well, there's so many things here. I guess Shelby will remember when some of his employees used to eat at my mother's. She loved to cook, and Amos didn't like to eat. So the boys that worked for him would go down there and take their meals. And
Did Shelby eat there sometimes?
I think once in a while he went too.
Mm-hmm.
But at least he knew enough about Mama's cooking to recommend her.
Yeah.
And she kept 2 young ladies that worked for TVA. They roomed and boarded there.
Yes.
And I won $50 at one of Shelby's bank nights.
Oh, at the theater.
During the Depression, and $50 then was about $5,000 now to me. And Duncan came here from Missouri in 1929 when the light poles were just raw trees. The stems were still on them and the bark and everything. And so it progressed from there after they started making changes in the power system, you know.
Yes.
And he sold the first range through the